So I want you to think about how could you help Victoria University revolutionise sport through science today? Or on the flip, how can VU help revolutionise your business? So while it's fantastic that we're in here at the G today, I'm actually going to talk to you about Victoria University's activities over the train lines there at the National Tennis Centre, where what we have done, our VU's Institute of Health and Sport have partnered with Tennis Australia's Innovation Division to form what's called the Game Insight Group, or what we like to call GIG. Now, GIG consists of 11 staff, many of whom are jointly appointed across the two organisations, and they're expert data scientists, computer engineers, and sports scientists. And then we're supported by another dozen wonderful PhD students. You might have met a couple of the guys this morning, and undergraduate cadets. And collectively, we're on a journey to develop players, coaches, fans, the media's engagement with tennis and make it a deeper, more substantial one. So today I'm going to talk to you about 3 Game Insight Group initiatives. Firstly, I'll tell you about some new statistics that we're using that we think tell a better tennis story. Then I'm going to talk to you about emotion and how we can track player emotion during a match. And then finally, how we're developing the perfect game so that we can customise the game of tennis to everyone's needs. So let's think tennis. One of the most traditional sports there is. We've just come off the back of Wimbledon last week, where tradition has it, of course, the players are forced to wear white and spectators are forced to eat strawberries and cream, one of the key traditions of the sport. Couple that with the scoring system. So the scoring system evolved from the French medieval period and hasn't changed ever since. So we've still got 15, 30, 40 deuce rather than first to 5. So it's a very traditional sport. And it's interesting, despite its professionalism, the analysis and subsequent insight that we get from tennis is still relatively rudimentary. And so that's where GIG comes in. And so I'm going to show you some data from the recent Wimbledon titles where Federer, the famous quarterfinal match up against Kevin Anderson, where Federer surprisingly lost 13-11 in the 5th. So a really close match. But what you can see, these are the traditional stats that are put up after the match. And what you see is that Federer is actually shading Anderson on most of the key performance indicators that traditional statistics provide. And the reason for this is really simple. The traditional statistics ignore a couple of fundamental truths about tennis. One, you don't need to win more points than your opponent to win the match. And 2, not all points count for the same. And so the Game Insight Group has developed a clutch performance metric. And so essentially what we do is we weight every single point in the match, with the points that have more influence on determining which player is going to win the match being weighted higher, having a higher pressure value. And then there's the points that aren't as important, they have a lower pressure value. As a consequence, we're able to then basically look and generate statistics such as a clutch differential, where we can compare a player's performance, where how do they go under the high performance points relative to how do they go on the more normal lower pressure points. And so the data on the screen will illustrate that when we look at clutch performance, Kevin Anderson was the player that clutched that match more effectively than Federer. In particular, his return. He made some very high pressure returns that changed the course of the match. So we see clutch as a good example where we can tell a better tennis story than what's currently out there. And I think that equally applies to business more broadly, where obviously you want to know who your clutch performers are and you want to know what your clutch metrics are as well. The second innovation I want to discuss is emotion. And when I think tennis and I think emotion, I go back to my childhood and I think about one of my favourite players, Bjorn Borg. So 11 Grand Slam titles, 6 French Opens, 5 consecutive Wimbledons. He was number 1 in the world. He was awesome. But if we think about his emotional profile, I'll get you to visualise it. There's enough of you old enough in the room to remember what Bjorn Borg looked like. How do you visualise him? Visualise him when he's under pressure, maybe down a set point. Then visualise him when he's about to break a break serve or then win the match. My visualisations look like this. Set point down, just winning a big point and then winning the game. In simple terms, he was the Iceman. He just did not change. He just always had the same emotional profile. So if we fast forward 40 years from when Borg was number one, VU scientists are now able to profile the emotional state of players throughout a match. So we take the broadcast feed from a tennis match, and using machine learning, we're able to extract and learn facial action units so that we can generate an emotional profile of a player. We like to call that the emotion tracker. And at the moment, we're currently having the emotion tracker learn 1,000 different player faces so that we can be ready for the Australian Open in 2019 and profile. So I think you're getting an example on the screen now. Just out of interest, we have profiled the big four. And not surprisingly, Federer is the most mentally neutral or emotionally neutral and focused player, which you might see there. Rafa is the most nervous. And then Murray and Djokovic are more likely to be the most angered or annoyed of the players. So it's got a good ring to it in terms of, I think we're onto something here. And we see the emotion tracker as something that's got great value, both in certainly engaging fans, hopefully at a deeper level when they're watching a match, understanding the ebbs and flows of emotion that a player's experiencing. And then also we see it as a training tool that we could actually help players develop their emotional profile during a game, so they can develop maybe a game face and be more effective as a consequence. The flip side of that, it will make our job harder if they've got this game face and it's harder to read their expression. So there's quid pro quo. In terms of broader application, I'm sure you could use it as a web conferencing tool, make sure that the person on the other end of the computer is engaged and attentive. Recently I saw news out of China where secondary school, they've implemented facial recognition technology so they can monitor the students during class, which is maybe a little extreme, but they're able to profile whether the students are engaged, confused, angry. But in a world first, I've been able to set up the emotion tracker here today, and I've actually had it trained in on our MC, Brett McLeod. Where are you, Brett? Over here. So we'll just go to your emotional profile, Brett. So clearly he's deeply engaged with my presentation. Thanks, Brett. That's great. Anyway, the final innovation I want to discuss is where the Game Insight Group are trying to develop the perfect game. And this is a play on words from a CSIRO report that identified the perfect fit as a sporting megatrend, something that's going to be influential for the next couple of decades. And in essence, we've flipped that term into the perfect game, where we're really trying to customise the game so that it suits any particular individual. Whether you're a child first learning the sport, where it's critical that we keep you involved in that sport, or whether you're one of the ageing population that we have a massive number of, and the traditional game needs to be adjusted to keep you playing. So in each case, we want to customise the game for you. So I've got a number of examples of how we're doing that. So VU scientists have worked quite closely with coach educators from Tennis Australia to investigate their Hot Shots program, which is Tennis Australia's modified sport offering for children. So if you haven't seen it, shorter racket, a decompressed tennis ball that bounces at the right height for children, lower net, smaller court. And our research has demonstrated that if children learn in these conditions, they learn far more effectively than if they're put into a more traditional adult-like tennis court. And the key thing is, when they do learn this way, they become more engaged as a consequence. And if they're more engaged, they're more likely to stay participating within the sport, which is obviously what Tennis Australia want from this particular product. That's a good thing for the sport, healthy participation numbers. It's a good thing for the kids, because they're then going to be healthy because they're actually participating in activity. So that's been a really fabulous start. But interestingly, other research that we conducted, we found that not just children, but all tennis players, 80% of you are using the wrong racket. So it's sort of astounding that you go and buy the right pair of shoes, you make sure they fit. But when it comes to an expensive piece of sporting equipment, we're not buying the right piece of equipment that fits. And so from that point of view, that's again been a partnership with Tennis Australia where VU scientists have developed what we call the Racket Room. And it's the world's first racket customisation service. So we've analysed all 170 different models of racket on the market, and we're now, through a sophisticated data engine, we're able to recommend the right racket for you to enhance your performance. We can customise that recommendation based on your particular needs. So that whether you want more spin, speed, power, control, we can adjust and make the right racket for you. And I know a number of you are coming on a tour over the bridge after this session, which will be great. Now, with the Racket Room, we've had over 200 players come through, ranging from professionals through to 10-year-olds. And our ambition there is to go online and in-store in the near future. So hopefully we can customise and help players find the right racket for them. And I think this whole concept of customisation, while it was identified as a sporting megatrend, it's clearly a broader trend through all of business. The final perfect game initiative I want to discuss is Unreal. Literally Unreal. It's a virtual reality training simulator for training tactical performance in tennis. And we see this as a great example of a perfect game because we can customise the game to your skill level. So if you're a professional, we can have point patterns that represent someone that you've got to come up against and play in a tournament. But equally, if you're a first timer, we can manipulate who you play so that you learn basic core craft. Virtual reality technology and simulation like this isn't new, it's been around for a while, but there's significant technological and learning issues associated with getting this type of training right. And if you're going to ensure this type of training transfers to on-the-job performance, you really do need to follow some principled steps. And I think VU, we've established what those steps are, and we're doing a really good job in that regard. So hopefully I've given you a quick overview of VU's partnership with Tennis Australia as represented by the Game Insight Group. Clearly today I've focused on tennis, but our ambition is obviously to explore many other sports and domains with a similar type of model. So hopefully leading to deeper engagement for all those that want to be involved. So I'll leave you with my opening prompt is, how can you help VU revolutionise sport through science, or equally, how can we help revolutionise your business? Thanks.